All right. I think that we are live and we're recording this webinar. We'll give everybody 2 minutes to log in and then I'll jump in. But I appreciate everybody coming today to attend the webinar, turning no into yes. So maybe we'll just wait 1 minute. At 4:01, I'll get started. So I'm going to try and keep it to 30 minutes exactly today, which if any of you have met me at any of the conferences and things like that, the people I work with know that sometimes I can talk a lot longer. So I'm going to keep that reined in. All right, it's 4:01, so I'm going to officially get started. So thanks everybody for coming out to the webinar today. And again, we post all of these up on our website on the Pro Resources section. So today we're going to talk just about, kind of call it sales strategies. I like to think of it like we're not selling home inspectors. Even me for Sporecyte, I don't like to think of myself as a salesman. I like to think of myself as a consultant and helping people. I think that's, kind of what I'm going to talk, most about here. Okay, so quick agenda, just talk a little bit about Sporecyte, why inspectors struggle with sales like this. We'll talk about some real world scenarios that, I've had conversation with home inspectors and a few sales strategies, and then Q&A. So there's a chat feature in the window here. If you have a question, and I'd say even if it's not a question that relates to what we're talking about, feel free to put it up. We'll cover all the questions that kind of cover what we're talking about today. But if we have extra time, I'll jump to those. So jumping right in, my name is Jim Bates. I am the director of sales, and I kind of got this whole thing started. I was initially the director, product manager for this product, and just have been with, morphing this into, the team that we are now. So we have a really big team and a really big part of our company. So our company, the overarching company, is called TechCyte, which a lot of you are probably familiar with, but some of you might not know. TechCyte, realistically, really it's a software company. It was founded in 2013, and it was a technology transfer that some guys bought out of the University of Utah and another, big laboratory. And they had been developing this technology. The founders of TechCyte bought it, and we kind of kept building and building. So TechCyte as a whole, we are literally world leaders in machine learning and doing artificial intelligence for digital microscopy, so microscopic things. Our artificial intelligence is probably a little bit different than what is so popular right now, which is large language models like ChatGPT. So we do a training. We use computer vision, and we train our AI models. So we have a data set of images that we tell the software, the AI, here's what you're looking at, and then we train it to recognize those things. So initially, TechCyte focused on things in the air, liquids, smearables like blood, bodily fluids, things like that. And as we started working with Mayo Clinic, they asked us to branch out into the anatomical pathology as opposed to just clinical pathology. So now we are doing tissue work in the human space. So, we're used by home inspectors and environmental hygienists, stuff like that, as well as labs, pathologists, doctors, veterinarians. Okay, whoops, jumped ahead. So there's 3 verticals. Sporecyte's the environmental vertical, which you're part of. In the human vertical, the company is going by the TechCyte brand as well as the overarching company name. So our primary collaboration partner, in case you didn't know, is the Mayo Clinic. So that's a really phenomenal collaboration that they use our products and help us develop new products that will be used around the world. And then in the veterinary or animal world, we have a single global partner, Zoetis. Zoetis is the biggest animal health company in the world. It used to be, now I'm forgetting the name. I'll come back to it. But anyway, it was a spin-off from, I can't remember it. But anyway, so we are literally all over the world, even in China, with vet scan images through Zoetis. So our lab, a little bit about it, we do participate in the AIHA MPAT program, which is, recognizing and properly identifying, mold spores. We have a lab license in the state of Texas, which is the only state in the country that requires a laboratory that's doing analysis for mold to have a state license. We're also ISO certified 17025. So accredited is really the right name. And then we do participate, our lab directors, a PAACB, so Pan American Aerobiology Certification Board. So that's a very high level training in mold identification, understanding all those background things. And also he's an industrial hygienist. So have all those things covered. Some of you might see some other labs that have a bunch more accreditations and certifications, because we just do one thing and we only need these. So just to let you know that we don't need all these other ones, for water or asbestos. Those all have different things that they get. We have the things that we need to be, the best at what we do. Our commitment to you, those that have been with us for a long time know this, and those that are just starting with us will learn it and have probably heard it, that we're really dedicated to making your life better. As I started developing this product, my overarching concept was always like, how do I make a home inspector's life better? So, all the things we have, the website, the training, this web series are all geared around that. And we really pride ourselves on having good customer service. We'll slip up occasionally. I wish we never did, but it's just reality. And we'll do everything to, get things right and talk to you and help you out in any way we can. A couple quick bullet points on us: $20 per sample, same day turnaround. So the same day we get the samples, we'll turn that report around as long as we get it at the lab by 3:00 Mountain Time. And then we have overnight shipping. And just to kind of reiterate here a little bit, when you buy cassettes from our website, the air capture cassettes, we will send you in that outbound shipment. For every 3 cassettes you buy, we'll send you a return shipping label and envelope. We don't charge for the shipping or the return. We don't charge for the return shipping or the sample analysis until we're ready to hit the send button. So once the report's done, we'll hit the send button. We'll charge your account for the report, and then we'll hit the send button. So those things are all in arrears. The only thing you pay for up front are the consumables like the air cassettes or surface tape lifts, things like that. One thing that we do have now, we have introduced the AirTrap XL. The company that makes these is a company called Apicor out of England. They make all kinds of products for our company for when you're doing a lab test. Say, I hate to, the easy one to me is like, the pee in the cup test. To put it kind of out there, they make the cup. They'll do collection things. So any kind of lab testing that needs some kind of a collection mechanism or things like that, they'll make those test kits, and those kits go out all over the world. They produce millions of them. They wanted to do something with Sporecyte, so we worked with them in developing this product. The guy who invented the aerosol, I've got an aerosol right here. Dan Baxter was the inventor of the aerosol. He became kind of a primary consultant on the development of this new cassette as well. So it was great to have him participating in that, making sure that we were developing an exceptional product. We have a white paper on this if you're interested, a study that's done, but these are, every bit as good as an aerosol and actually a little bit better. So you can buy those on our website. Okay, why do inspectors struggle to sell? So when I think of this, and as I talk to inspectors, I think it's confidence is the number one thing. So, many inspectors will feel unsure or hesitant, and they might feel that way for a few different reasons. One would just be general knowledge, but 2, I think a lot of inspectors don't want to be seen as trying to sell something or upsell things. When I talk to inspectors, in my view as an inspector's job is to be an inch deep and a mile wide. So you're looking at all kinds of different things in a home. You're not the electrician fixing, an electrical panel, or you're not the plumber fixing a toilet leak, but you're there to identify things. And the mold tests and indoor air quality kind of things, they go along with that. Hey, we're helping you test for these things, but you don't want to be seen as a salesperson being pushy, things like that. So I think if you really understand the product, how it can help people, you take an advisory kind of role. Anyway, So the more you know about the report, things in the home. We'll talk a little bit more about these things as we go through. But I think knowledge is super important. There's things that we have in Sporecyte. If you've been on our website, Sporecyte.com, in the right-hand corner, you'll see kind of a list of items, how it works, shop. On the far right side, it'll say pro resources. And the pro resources are where these webinars are housed. So you can always come back and watch those. We have training videos, we have white papers, we have marketing resources. So if you haven't visited that, there's a ton of information there for you. And that's part of our, trying to make you have everything you need to be successful and to be trained. Also here, the IAC2 course is put on by InterNACHI, and that's a great course. I would encourage anybody that's an InterNACHI member and to go take that course. It's free if you're an InterNACHI member, and it will really take you on you'll have a very thorough understanding. To say that you need to do that before you do mold testing, I don't think you need to do that, but I think it really helps to do that. And the more knowledge you have, it just helps you as you're upfront consulting somebody in your consultative role, an expert role. The other thing I wanted to mention is I think home inspectors feel, and I certainly do feel, that they are viewed by home buyers and real estate agents, as consultants isn't the word I want to use, but I can't think of what it is, but they're trusted advisors. So, they're not salespeople, they're trusted advisors. So really, when you're looking at this and you see that somebody, could benefit by having a mold test, that's when you want to say like this might be the thing for you, or this would help you. So those kind of things. Let's see. So shifting the mindset, again, you're kind of helping, not selling. Sorry, I wasn't looking at the slide enough, but that's the consultative problem solving approach. I mean, that's really the inspectors that I talk to, they're really successful at these things. They're always consulting. So I think that's a huge thing, knowledge and consultative approach. It's not about fear, it's about education, peace of mind. So for the home buyer or a property owner, if you're doing somebody that, has a question, but they already own the property, it's about, you're learning about the home, and it's about peace of mind, that there's no unseen problems or issues that might be identified, through a mold test. So you're protecting your investment. And most of the time when we find problems, they're not deal killers. Most of the time when it's a deal killer, it's something, super obvious, and you may not even need to do a mold test, because you might just see, there's mold all over a wall or something. But there still could be places where mold could be growing away from that. That would be an indicator like, hey, let's test some other areas, but you could see something going on there. And if you see something, it's a good place to do a surface test. So it really allows solutions to problems, and you can find problems, before you own the property, and now you've got to pay for, a new window that's leaking or things like that. All right. Real world scenarios. Let's see. I don't think I need a mold test. So most people, because mold is microscopic, so it's not generally visible to the naked eye, unless, I shouldn't say that. If it's just, in the air, you're not seeing it in the air. And often, mold is kind of in a hidden corner, or, someplace that you're not thinking of. It could just be like, if you've got a basement that's cement, it could just be growing inside, in the cement, and you don't even know it, or whatever, could be on the cement. We've seen that. So sometimes it's visible, sometimes it's not visible. So people might not even realize like, this would be a great idea to get a mold test. It could be in HVAC systems, it could be in drains, all kinds of hidden places, corners. Again, so things to keep in mind in these situations, as you're going through an inspection, is there a musty smell? Are there water stains? Did you notice a roof leak? Even outdoors, you might see, there's a roof leak, or, there's no gutter, or the gutter's leaking and water's going right down into the foundation. We've seen that happen to cause mold leaks. So outdoor signs can help it too, or cause it. Seller's disclosure might mention that there was a water leak somewhere. It might say got fixed, but you want to double check like, okay, did they really fix it? Other things, might be more health related. Are there infants in the home? Somebody that's respiratory compromised or has issues, or elderly? And while you can't, I'll talk a little bit more about health impacts, but you can't use the report to identify a health issue. But you could take that report, to a doctor. So I'll talk a little bit about more of it as we go. Also, with the Sporecyte report, we really don't emphasize it a lot, but we do have a section at the end of the mold lab part of the report where we do identify particulates, so human skin fragments versus animal skin fragments, pollen, hyphal fragments, which are some like trees and roots of mold, all kinds of things, carbon, soil, insect parts, things like that. So it's super interesting in our images section. I'll talk a little bit about that going forward, but we identify these things and then we show you the actual pictures of what's in the mold. So somebody that's, has any worries about, air quality, indoor air quality for particulates, because we can't see gases, but there's tons of things that will help homeowners, buyers get ahead of the curve on these things. All right, mold testing is too expensive. Really somebody's investing, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't think there's many homes in the country today that aren't under hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then millions of dollars. So as you are buying this home or making one of the biggest investments of your life, to spend an extra, $350, $300, $450, which is typically what I hear home inspectors charging when they're out on the job already to add this service, relative to what you're going to gain is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And also often if you find that there's some kind of an issue, it could be, you could put that in as a, a concession for cleaning, or you can get something fixed. Because usually most of the problems that are found, it's not so egregious that it destroys the deal. I mean, that's very not so common. And usually when that happens, there's lots of other things that are wrong with the home. But it allows you to get in front of, potential issues and solve those before you close on the home and you own it. So don't be afraid. And that could be another reason guys would be, inspectors would be afraid to sell it. It's like, oh, I'm going to destroy this deal, or I'm going to really make my real estate agent, who's super important, to you as lead gen and a partner that you're working with on these things. Generally it's not going to destroy the deal. You just need to understand, okay, here's how we use this tool. It's like saying, okay, you've got an issue with your plumbing, we need to resolve that. So I'll kind of leave it at that. I think I covered everything there. Let's see. I don't have allergies, so I'm not worried about mold. Again, it's kind of a similar thing. I'll go back to, you can't use the report as a diagnosis for you're feeling sick. So obviously it's, you did a report and there's some chatomium on there. That's chatomium. It's probably, an indication, but there's mold everywhere. So we're all exposed to mold all the time. And because people react different ways to different amounts, to different types of mold, you wouldn't want to say, oh, this is causing it, because you can't unequivocally know that that's why. It could be a, possible high indication, but you don't want to say that. You're not making health diagnoses. We're not doctors. We're not experts in that, but we can say, well, we know there's probably a water issue here, and you really got to stop that water issue. That will stop the mold growth, and that will definitely help you. So mold can cause respiratory issues, fatigue, headaches. You know how those things impact people, and also just damaging your home over time. So I think I covered those things. Another thing I wanted to mention here, we talk about how this report's really focused on mold, but I mentioned that there's particulates that we have in the report and the images. I've had several occasions where inspectors did a job for people who were really sick in the home. And when the report came back, they did not have an elevated mold condition. And they're just like, oh my gosh, how can this be? I'm looking at your lab part of the report, which is where we have the name of the mold and the spore count. And they're like, how can this be so low? We're expecting this to be, crazy off the hook numbers, and we're not really seeing anything. And when I talk to those inspectors, I'm like, well, let's look through the report together. So we'll look at that, and then we look down in the particulate section. We just like, gosh, there's a lot of particulate. We slide down, look at the images, and the images are just showing that there's tons of, debris, dust, all kinds of things in the air. So I've had this happen several times. It actually happened with our very first inspector had this happen. So I'm going to tell his story. But he called me up one day. He's like, how can the report not be having mold? Because these people are really sick. So of course I said, let's look through this. There was tons in the images and the counts. You could see there was all kinds of, skin fragments. There were insect parts, just all kinds of, things components of dust in the air. So, that dust can absorb, toxic fumes. It could, be a sink for all kinds of different things. I don't want to go too far afield, but I said, I can't guarantee that this is why, but in all these cases that I'm aware of, the air was just really filthy dirty. So I told him, like, I would tell them, you can't say this is why you're sick, but I would start, you can see how much, particulate is in your air. So I would, clean up my house and clean up my air. And it was so great. He's like, oh, Jim, I could never tell somebody like, your air is filthy, clean up your house. So I kind of thought about it for a second. I'm like, okay, Ryan, I would couch it this way, tell the people that this is very common. We see it all the time. And the first thing to do, is to work on cleaning up the air through cleaning. And he's like, yeah, I think I could tell them that. So a little tip from the field. The home looks fine. Why test? As we kind of mentioned, as mold is, often invisible. It's amazing how many times we find mold problems and you would never know it. I'll go to a couple examples of that. So it's just good to catch those unseen things that people aren't going to be able to just see without doing some kind of a test. Of course, the Sporecyte test. Seller already had a mold test done. I would always just do my own test, especially using the Sporecyte test, because when you have the particulate and especially the image just really back up. I've had so many times when people are like, are you sure there's chatomium here? Once inspector did a clearance test and it came back with chatomium in it. She's like, the remediation company is just here. I know it looks spotless, but it says there's chatomium. Can you go back and look at this sample again? And I said, well, let's pull up the report. So we pull up the report. Yes, it shows in the lab portion that there's chatomium. So we go down to the images, and sure enough, there's images of chatomium. I'm like, there's for sure chatomium here. These are actual images. So it really helps to be able to, again, back those things up. And do your own test, not just take their. Okay, so some real life scenarios. Got to double check my time. I'm supposed to be done in 8 minutes, so I'll go pretty quick. Sales strategies, real stories. So here's a story. It was awesome. The inspector called me up. He's like, man, can you go through this report with me? Because this is brand new construction and we're finding a ton of mold and I don't see it. So I went through the report with him like, yeah, you got all kinds of, we have in our report, we've got the mold divided into 3 categories. So, we've got indoor water related, then you've got indoor, outdoor and outdoor mold. So outdoor molds just generally don't grow on typical building materials. So we don't often find those inside the home. They blow in from outside. Indoor, outdoor spores, they float through the air so they can easily come in from outside. So that's why we call them indoor, outdoor. Anyway, the indoor water related, they're heavy or clumpy or sticky. They're not designed to float through the air. They're designed for a beetle to walk by or something like that. The mold gets stuck to their leg and they crawl a little bit further and it rubs off on something else. So we're all kinds of these indoor water related spores. He's like, I just don't understand it. So I'm like, okay, let's look at the images. Yes, you're absolutely seeing these things. We're not finding those in the outdoor sample. We're finding tons of them indoors. So that's a pretty strong indication something's going on. So he went and did a little bit more research. Turned out there'd been a huge rainstorm before they buttoned up the roof and, got everything locked up. And the contractor just continued finishing. And there was just a ton of mold in that house. It was, crazy. Another great example. This one was in Phoenix, Arizona. I think it was Phoenix, for sure it was Arizona. The inspector calls me up and it was an 8-plex or an 11-plex, apartment building. They had just remodeled again, the whole thing, and it looked perfect. And there was just tons of mold spores. And one of the things that we look for, you'll probably be familiar with a mold called Aspergillus penicillium. And that mold grows in a little chain. So like a little ball on a little ball, kind of growing. So when that's close to the growth source, you'll see these mold spores still stuck together. But as they dry up, they pop off the growth source, they'll go into individual little spores. And just even the slightest wind currents will break those strings apart. But we look for those strings. Anyway, this job had tons of those strings, had individual spores, but all kinds of these strings. So we look at the images section after we looked at the counts, and sure enough, just these strings of the spores all over the place. Like, there's no question, something's going on. There was one unit that didn't have, all these mold spores. And so he went back and looked around, and there was a swamp cooler, and the swamp cooler had, it was the same old swamp cooler. They didn't do anything to fix that up. So he was just blowing tons of mold into these apartment units, and he never would have known if he didn't do a mold test. And it looked absolutely perfect. So easy solution. Another one I kind of mentioned before, but it was outside. There was I don't remember if the rain gutter was broken or there just wasn't a rain gutter, and they could see on the outside there was some staining, and then it was going down into the foundation, and then it was kind of leaching through the foundation and creating mold. And again, that one was a lot of mold. So a couple kind of quick stories. The other thing I would encourage you guys, let's see, I think it's on the next slide. Okay, I'll talk about that in a second. So, the assumptive close. So instead of trying to say, hey, you should do a mold test, as you're going through, the inspection, you can be looking for water staining or some smells or some things that, indicate high humidity, reasons, or as you're talking to them in the consultative process, do you have young children? Do you have any, people with respiratory issues, things like that? Again, even though we can't use it to diagnose a mold problem, it gives you a next step. So that's a good thing. Let's see, recommend mold testing with every inspection. Like, I know some inspectors, and they just include it in their inspection. So it's just part of the base package. A lot of people order it up front, but a lot of times you don't know. Sorry, guys. I have my phone on my timer, so I try not to go over 30 minutes. I lost my train of thought. So I'm going to move on from there because I need to wrap it up. Would you like to add mold testing to our full quality package? Yeah. So again, do you need it on every home? I think it could be beneficial for everybody to have an overview. Again, we have mold spores, and we do have this, particulate, and we're gonna work on our particulates this year and actually create a kind of home health for particulates graph. Now that we have such big data, we've just done over the years just so many tests. Now we're going to create, use that particulate data to come up with that. How clean is your home air? So, but every home probably could benefit. I mean, it's always you're protecting your investment, but I don't want to tell you like go out and try and sell this to everybody. For sure, when you find somebody that could benefit, I think that's good as a consultative. Like, I think you'd really benefit from this. Here's some issues, things like that. So I think you get enough of me talking about that. Educate first, sell later. I think, again, this goes to here's some issues, you've got obviously some high humidity areas. Again, you're consulting and then say, I think you could benefit from this. One of the things I would encourage you guys to do, if you haven't done it already, here at the bottom of these bullet points, it says, watch the 5 secrets to mold marketing. And that's a webinar. That was one of our early webinars that we did. I'm on there with one of our inspectors. And he talks about, at that time, he was he brought in, sent us more mold tests than any other inspector. He was doing a ton. He talks about his overall approach to, environmental testing. So it goes over more than just mold and helping people, decide, or I'll say sell a mold test. It talks about, his consultative approach, and it's mold and indoor air quality, as well as VOCs and, gosh, I can't think of the word I want to use, but any of those. So I would encourage you guys all to go watch that. It's on our website, sporecyte.com. You go over to that right-hand side, pro resources, and this is in the webinars, and you'll find that. And he does a really good job on walking you through that. Okay, so question and answer. Again, if anybody has a question, feel free to just put it in the chat. So first question is, Rich asked, how does knowing exactly what type of fungal classification is present help the client? So the thing that really helps a lot is knowing if it's one of those indoor water-related spores. So we generally call those indicator spores because, as I mentioned, those spores aren't designed to propagate by floating through the air, floating in from outside. They are spores that grow well on building materials. The indoor-outdoor spores grow well on building materials too, but they're designed to float through the air, so we know that those can easily come in from outside. But when we're finding that top category, Chaetomium, Stachybotrys, Aspen strings, when it's still in its string format, and we're the only lab that I'm aware of that puts that into every report. We count those, the strings, and then in the indoor-outdoor, we count individual spores. So that can really help out understanding, what's going on, what could be causing this. So that helps just identify, what really is going on. Primarily, again, you couldn't use it to say, here's what's making you sick. But it does help to know, where's that probably growing to identify that there is a moisture issue. Okay. Next question. Do you have mycotoxin testing or bacteria? So mycotoxin, you need to do I think those are PCR tests. So we can only test things that we can see. So mycotoxin would be a different kind of test and much more expensive test. So, or bacteria, we don't do bacteria testing. Bacteria is really tiny, and the microscopes that we use, the digital microscopes we use, aren't to that level of detection for bacteria. So we do not do that right now. Next question. So did you say that elevated mold spores can come from outside? So we look, the outdoor sample, the reason you take an outdoor sample is for a control. So we have an idea of what's going on outside. And then we look at what those indoor samples are showing us. So if there's a big elevation inside from outside, then that can be the, real indicator that something is going on inside. So the goal, if you have fewer spores inside than outside, that's a pretty good indication the spores that you're finding inside are coming in from outside. And that's why that elevated, that's why the outside sample as a control is so important. And each spore that we look at, we give you the at-a-glance page and highlights on the lab report. And I would always say we divide our report into 3 sections. You've got the at-a-glance page, which just says, green, yellow, red. Do I have a problem or not? And then we've got the lab part of the report, which is what are the mold spores? What are the counts per cubic meter? And then we've got, particulates as part of that. And then the third section is images. So each one of the spores in the report that gets a, yellow, we don't highlight the green spores, but we will highlight yellow for slightly elevated to red, which is heavy elevation. Gosh, now I lost my train of thought again. But we need, each one of those spores has a different ratio that will cause that highlight. So it's important to know what came from outside and what's going on inside, and the different levels, indoor water related, indoor outdoor, those have different ratios. So hopefully I explained that fairly clearly. Okay, Jason, what if the report says there's mold, but the seller disagrees? I mean, this is such a good question because, and the nice thing about our report is that, we have the images to back up. So if we're showing there's no mold, but we can show you a picture of a bunch of skin fragments. I had one of these last night. The inspector's like, I think there's mold in here. I know this air is so dirty, and I did this air sample and a surface sample, and it's not coming up with very much. So I said, okay, let's look at your numbers. Let's see what's going on. Let's look at your particulates. Holy crap, these particulates are off the hook. You've got, 100,000, 200,000 of these particulates. something's going on, even though it's not mold. So we jumped out of the image section once again, like, okay, look at these, images, the trace. We show the trace samples, and we have a webinar on the report. I'm going to watch that. I'm thinking of doing another webinar, kind of doing a walkthrough of the report, which I think would be super good. But anyway, we look at the side-by-side traces, outdoor versus indoor, and then the 30x zoom. I'm like, look how much, skin fragments are in here and a bunch of insect parts. He's like, there were insects all over in there. I'm like, obviously this is just super, super dirty. And I'm like, we're only seeing a couple mold spores, almost nothing, but you can see the images. So, let's see, I lost my train of thought once again. Elevated mold. Oh, the seller disagrees. So, we have the images to back it up, which is just, it's so helpful to have those images in so many situations. Okay. What if the agent tells the buyer they don't need a mold test? So, indoor air quality mold testing has grown so much from what I've seen. I've been working on this for about 6 years, almost 6 years now. And from where it was 6 years ago and the amount we see right now is just crazy. I would tell the real estate agent, I would say we might not, but we might. If the buyer wants to do it, we want to be consultative and help them, protect this investment, the biggest investment they'll probably ever make. And try and help them protect them as much as we can. So, I'd say, there's some indications that this could be a benefit for them. I would give it that. I could think about that some more, but I think that's the number one thing is like, we're trying to help these people, and protect them from, buying something where we could have solved something in the beginning. I do think that agents worry about their deal, getting blown up. And I know that inspectors, can worry about that too. And I think it's, educating your real estate agent in the benefits of this and saying, from my knowledge, from ones I'm familiar with, very rarely does it blow up a deal. And when it does blow up a deal, like there's 3 other things that are, that are bad too. So then the culmination of things, blow up the deal. It's not just the one thing. It's, 2 or 3 things. Any one on its own, you could fix it up and do it, but it would be a bunch of things. Most of the time when we find mold issues, they're things that can be resolved, but it's good to be aware of and get them done, before you buy this house, and then you're stuck paying for everything. Let's see, I've gone past the 30 minutes. I'll take a couple more questions really quick. Got to check my timer. Oh, I'm at 27 minutes. Oh, somehow I turned my timer off, so I apologize. So I'm over, but really quick. Sporecyte has different molds, definitions, characteristics, et cetera, for us to learn more about them and interpret. So it's saying, does Sporecyte have different mold definitions, characteristics, et cetera, for us to learn more about them and interpret the reports better, so we can better educate our clients even more, like a white paper report, manual video, something like that. We do have several webinars on things like that. And we do have a fungal glossary. If you go to, let me take a quick look. Whoops. If you go to our website, sporecyte.com, go to Pro Resources and just scroll down to the bottom. On the bottom left, you'll see the fungal glossary. So that'll take you through basics. It doesn't get too deep into the spore and definition, but that will get you a long way to going. And we do have some webinars where we're talking more about mold, mycology, different things like that. Okay, so as I wrap it up, Ashley is here with me behind the scenes, and I just want to give a quick shout out to her. She's been, instrumental in putting this together and doesn't get enough recognition. So I want to give her some recognition. She's great, and so much of all these things that are on our website and training, she's responsible for. I just get to be, the face, or Dylan or Jason. or Devin or Alyssa, on our team. And you guys would probably all, talk to them one time or another. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I thank everybody for, being present today. If you've got other questions, feel free to send those. You can send them to sales@sporecyte.com, info@sporecyte.com. And I'll let you go. So thanks so much. Have a great rest of your week and upcoming weekend.